Today we're going to be talking about one of the most important groups within an ecosystem. They fall into, we've talked about producers, and we know about the consumers that live off those producers. This is another group of consumers, but they are not, we don't think about them a lot in terms of, they don't have the sharp teeth, and we don't put them in a group of either carnivores or herbivores. The group that we're going to be talking about today are the decomposers. And the decomposers are kind of the unsung heroes of an ecosystem because the decomposers are going to be responsible for breaking down organic matter and putting it back into its simplest form. So, when something dies or, when a tree falls over or a leaf falls to the ground, anything that happens, and it's no longer useful and it's not going to be eaten by another organism, the decomposers, that's when their job starts. So a lot of material within an ecosystem is broken down mechanically, right? Things are chewed up and they are left behind, and there's waste products left behind and all those types of things. So, but all of that material would stay there if it were not for the decomposers. The decomposers can take any of that material, whether it be bones and skeletons, or it's leaf litter, or it's animal waste, or any of those types of things. That can all be cleaned up by the decomposers. But it's not just the cleaning up process. It's not just they just clean it up and get rid of it, because that in itself would be great. That would prevent ecosystems from being waist deep in carcasses and leaf litter and all those types of things. But in addition to breaking them down and cleaning them up, decomposers are also going to make raw materials available to producers. So it goes right back into the system. It goes right back into that ecosystem, making it available. So we've got our producers, and we know that producers are feeding our consumers, right? We'll say primary consumers here. And primary consumers are being consumed by carnivores. All of these guys eventually are going to meet the decomposers, okay? Once these individuals have either lost material or they have been consumed to the point where they can't be consumed anymore, all that's left over is going to be broken down by the decomposers. And those decomposers make all of those nutrients and raw materials available again to the producers. Because remember, in addition to just light and water and carbon dioxide, plants and other producers need nutrients in their soil, right? They have to have a nutrient-rich soil in which to grow in. These guys make that possible. So who are the decomposers? Well, you wouldn't probably know if I asked you, because decomposers, you don't see them. Okay? Decomposers are bacteria and fungi. And you may say, no, I've seen fungi. I know what fungi look like. Those are mushrooms, right? And you're right. But the part of the mushroom that's actually doing the decomposition is below the ground. So it's this network of microscopic filaments that's going to be doing the breaking down. What you're seeing on the surface is what's called a fruiting body. So the fruiting body is the mushroom, the toadstool that we're all familiar with. And all that's there for is for reproduction. That spore is going to rupture and it's going to spread spores of that fungi everywhere. So you may have kicked one before and it may have left like a cloud of smoke almost. Okay, that cloud, that was just billions of spores that are now going to go out and settle and grow new fungi somewhere else. But beneath the ground is where that's going to be, where they're going to be doing their work. So whether they're on the ground, whether they're growing on a fallen tree or whatever the case may be, it's the network that's underneath that toadstool where the real decomposition is being done. So because these producers rely on decomposers, the producers can only produce at a rate which their organic matter is available to them. Okay, or those nutrients are available to them. So we call that the primary productivity. And that is essentially the rate at which organic matter is created by producers. If the producers don't have these essential nutrients that are provided by the decomposers, that rate of primary productivity is going to drop significantly. Because it's just like anything else we've talked about or discussed. If you don't have the ingredients, you can't make your cake, right? So producers can have plenty of light and plenty of water, but if they're lacking a lot of nitrogen in the soil, because decomposers haven't provided it, then these producers can't photosynthesize, they can't make new material available for the primary consumers. So the whole system kind of slows down, right? The whole ecosystem comes to a grinding halt if the nutrients that are being provided by these decomposers suddenly stops. And that's the good thing, is it doesn't stop. These decomposers are going to be working round the clock, day and night, decomposing anything and everything to make them available for the ecosystem. And that's one of the things that ecologists and scientists have debated about is, when something is dead and it's decomposing, usually you know it. If you've ever been walking through a field or a forest and you've come across something that's dead, it usually doesn't smell very good. One of the newer things that we're discovering is the decomposers, what they're doing, the work that they're carrying out is actually kind of perhaps like a signal to the rest of the environment that the decomposition work is being done, and to deter other animals or other organisms from kind of investigating what's going on, because that basically means that organism is dead, and it's beyond what any other organism would want. So even the detritivores, who are the scavengers, are usually going to shy away from that because the work of the decomposers is being done. And like I said, science have kind of debated about that as to whether the decomposers actually release that smell as part of part of the decomposition process, and so other animals and organisms can recognize that's what's going on. So what are decomposers going to be giving back to the producers? Well, one of the big things that they're going to be providing is carbon, because we've talked about carbon providing the framework for all organic material and all organic matter. Another thing, which I've already mentioned, is the nitrogen. Right? These are two key critical nutrients, elements that are going to be returned to the ecosystem, specifically to these producers by decomposition. And the guys that show up just before the decomposers, the detritivores, they make the work of the decomposers quite a bit easier because they are going to break things down mechanically, so like by chewing something up. And then we even have detritivores like earthworms, which are going to break it down even smaller. The difference between the detritivores and the decomposers is the detritivores stop at the mechanical. That's all they can do. The decomposers are the only ones who have the ability to chemically break down that material and get it back to the raw nutrients. They're unique in the fact that they are just like producers, right? Producers are the only ones that have the ability to harness the energy of the sun or to harness the energy locked up in chemical compounds. Decomposers are the only one in this group that have the ability to take what was there and chemically break it down into something that can now be available to producers. So they play incredibly critical roles, these producers and decomposers, because without them, we don't have any consumers, right? There's no other group that can harness the energy. There's no other group that can get the nutrients back to the producers. So without them, like I said, you really don't have much of an ecosystem. Their roles are very much intertwined with one another in providing what an ecosystem needs to keep an ecosystem up and running and healthy. So without these decomposers and the work that they do, we wouldn't have ecosystems. You don't have the basis for it, or if you did, you wouldn't have it for very long, because what you're going to wind up with, if we look at a typical forest ecosystem, you're going to walk in there and let's say decomposers have stopped several months before that. Let's say the decomposers just all died off in the winter, and now here it is spring, right? So everything that they didn't decompose from the fall is still there. All the dead leaf litter, all the dead animal carcasses, all of the animal waste is still there. And then now spring has sprung and plants and animals are trying to get things going. Grass can't grow because the nutrients aren't in the soil to provide it to the grass. The trees are having trouble photosynthesizing because they don't have the nutrients that they need in the soil to produce new leaves. And so, now all of your herbivores, which were relying on eating the grass or eating the leaves, they're going to starve. So it would be a pretty messy situation pretty early on if we don't have these decomposers doing what they do. Throw out the fact that you'd be wading through, waist-high piles of leaf litter and other things, but just simply providing those nutrients and getting the material that we need, it wouldn't happen. So looking at the decomposers, this idea or this concept really illustrates what we call interdependence, and that is the interdependence that organisms have to one another. So producers rely on decomposers, and primary consumers rely on producers, and carnivores rely on primary consumers. None of them can stand alone without one another, right? So they're all reliant on each other or one another to keep that organism stable and running.